Good day, everyone. On behalf of QSG, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. QSG is committed to providing up-to-date, useful, and credible information on the topics that you care about. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Chris Skangas, and I will serve as your moderator for today's program. Today's webinar will be approximately 60 minutes in length. There'll be a 45-minute or so presentation, followed by a question and answer session. If you have any questions during the webinar today, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and at the end of the presentation, there'll be a Q&A session. Now I would like to introduce you to the speaker for today. James F. Leonard is a consultant and educator who specializes in teaching the principles of the late Dr. W. Edwards Deming as a new system of management. Jim has worked with manufacturing and service organizations throughout North America, Europe, and in China. He serves as a senior consultant for Quality Support Group in Westford, Mass. For 29 years, Jim presented his seminars for the Division of Corporate and Professional Education at the Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass., where he also served as an adjunct instructor in graduate operations and industrial engineering. He works with clients in China as an instructor for the China Institute for Innovation in Shanghai. Jim is an alumnus of the U.S. Naval Academy, where he majored in mechanical engineering and analytical management, as well as the George Washington University and Clark University. He resides in Ave Maria, Florida, with his wife, Kate, and they are the proud parents of 6 children and the grandparents of 10 grandchildren. Jim, thank you very much for supporting QSG. We really appreciate you supporting these webinars.
All right. Thank you, Chris, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for investing time you didn't have. It's a team process. I'm sure people saw this when advertised by Quality Support Group, and team process, touchy-feely, I don't want this. We have a consultant at Quality Support Group, Paul Hine, who's I've always viewed him as a real lean manufacturing guru. And we worked together years ago at the Rogers Corporation, where there was a corporate-wide process improvement initiative underway. And I was involved in leading projects and teaching statistical method and all this. And Paul was always kind of after me and saying, Jim, you always want to design an experiment. You always want to collect and analyze data. You always want to teach statistical methods. He said, sometimes a project team is unsuccessful, not because of a lack of skill or technical expertise or tools. He said, they just don't know how to play well together. And initially I was dismissive, but over time, as I've gotten older, Paul's right. That's true. So we decided at Quality Support Group, let's I usually do statistical methods of some sort. Let's talk about this team process. Among certainly what we have to talk about is what are the phases of the team process? What does a team go through from initial formation to successful completion and sign off? We'll talk about roles and responsibilities within the process, managing the process. In each phase of the process, what are a team's goals? How do I know what I've got to accomplish here? And we'll also address statistical methods and personal skills teams deploy to accomplish those goals. In his introduction, Chris said that I've always based all of my work on the teachings of Dr. W. Edwards Deming. And he always stressed there's a need for transformation, not just improvement in Western management. And I, over the years, have always presented his 14 points for management as a generic model of a healthy work environment. You and your coworkers have to cast your unique flesh onto this generic model. But when you think about the topic of teams, a couple of points really jump out at us. Number 9, break down barriers between departments and staff areas. Work and teams make this possible to put everybody in the company eventually to work to accomplish the transformation. Another opportunity for team deployment is his point 5, improve constantly and forever every process. And process issues, by their very nature, cut across and involve different groups, functions, and departments. So with much malice aforethought, management selects representatives from those different groups, functions, and departments, sits them down at one table, gives them the time, the training, the basic tools, at least, the help from some internal resource person should they need more than the basic tools, the accountability. Study this process. Come back to us with your recommendations backed up by data for changes we can make to the process to improve its future performance. And in one of his textbooks, Dr. Deming noted the power of these types of cross-functional teams when he wrote that people from design, engineering, production, sales, purchasing, maintenance, other groups could not only contribute to designs for the future, longer term, but also be very powerful instruments to accomplish improvements in the short term. So he's talking about, again, these teams. I talked about the team process. What is a team? We need a definition. We could look it up in the American College Dictionary, and we'll see a team defined as a group of people associated in some joint action. But I've always liked this definition of a team. A team is a group of people who work together to accomplish something no one individual can accomplish alone. A subtle, but I would suggest distinct difference, because you go back to the days of TQM and TQC and TQL and Six Sigma and all this stuff, and we had teams, we get in task forces, we get in subcommittees. And we ended up with organization in its most negative sense, groups of organization created to convert energy into solid waste. There is such a thing as a one-person team. For example, we want to have a gauge R&R or repeatability study performed on a test instrument in the lab. And we have a lab technician, has the training, has the tool, has the experience to do the repeatability study. Get out of his or her way and let them do the study. Don't saddle that person with a team. We want to preserve the power of these teams in this process only for those issues that no one individual can accomplish alone. So, and those of us who have done a little bit of graduate work in organization psychology, we can't seem to describe the process teams go through without, trivializing it. Oh, it's a process of forming, storing, norming, performing, to which normal people say, what, you pick those because they rhymed? Or we can't seem to describe it without using highfalutin four-syllable words. It's an iterative process of coordination, collaboration, consensus. No, what is this process? What is it? Phase one, we have to get started. Pull together the right group of people, clearly define our purpose, establish some ground rules for working together, and come up with an initial plan. Once we complete that phase, we move on to phase two, working together. This is the high energy, low conflict phase of the process. We are just blasting out alternatives, alternative causes, alternative solutions, alternative changes. And through data collection and other means, applying values to those alternatives. But in the working together phase, we don't have to reach agreements, no matter what the data may say. There's no need for argument. This is the high energy, highly creative phase of the process. So we blast out those alternatives. We've done some analysis. We have the data. And now we move on to phase three, reaching agreement. Let's just call it that. And if conflict is going to occur on your teams, plan on it in phase three, because right here is where each individual team member has to throw a stake in the ground. This is a good, sound decision. I'll support it. I'll implement it. I'll follow through, and I won't second guess it, and I won't Monday morning quarterback it. And unless every individual team member is in that position, now I want to show some return arrows on the process. Get out of the reaching agreement phase. Go back to the working together phase. Revisit the data. Maybe this person sees something that the rest of us missed. Go back to the getting started phase. Operate by your ground rules. How did we agree to handle something like this when we were first establishing this team? And we're going to address the team process as applied to the temporary multifunctional process improvement project team in this webinar. But the process is generic. It applies to all kinds of teams, including existing standing work teams. So let's talk about managing the process. So I'm calling this a steering committee. It can be the management staff, the leadership team, whatever you call it. It manages teams in this process by selecting major process improvement project teams, team members, team leaders, nurturing and reviewing teams' progress throughout the course of a project, as opposed to lobbing something over the wall at them and waiting for something to get lobbed back, reviewing and integrating final project team results, securing specialist support as needed for teams, cross-fertilizing resources and success stories. What we learned in one project, we make sure those lessons learned are shared with others in the organization. And they also have to establish audit systems to hold teams' gains. And also within the infrastructure here, we're talking about the steering committee is part of the infrastructure. The process improvement project team itself is a part of the infrastructure. What goes on here? We bring together those skills from various groups, functions, and departments because process issues always cut across departmental lines. The very deployment of these teams demonstrates management understanding, priority, and action. I've always heard about process improvement initiatives failing because of lack of management support, lack of management support. I hate that term, management support. I prefer to use understanding, priority, and action. The very deployment of these teams demonstrates management's understanding. This is the way to attack systems issues. It's a priority. Every manager whose employee is assigned to this team has to roll up his or her sleeve and say, okay, I'm going to be given some blood here. This person is not going to be fully available to me for the course of this project. And it is through these teams that management is able to take action to accomplish significant process improvements. These teams take on projects to solve major systems problems, but we don't survive by being good problem solvers. We have to prevent problems. And we accomplish that ultimately by continually following through on systemic improvements. Every time we improve a process, we're preventing future problems. The teams provide high visibility for teams and team members, and they provide the individual team member with a chance to make a difference. Remember, this issue I cannot handle alone. But as a part of this team, I can have an impact. So that's the infrastructure. Let's now climb inside the team. Every project team that is formed, FMEA, new product development, process improvement, I don't care. The sponsor, the management team, they have to designate a team leader. And this team leader is not the team supervisor. It's not the project manager. He or she is a working member of the team, a peer who just happens to have some other responsibilities, most of which are administrative in nature. For example, this person acts as the contact point for people outside the team. Your quality director wants to provide input or get some information from this team. We want him or her to know, call Mary. We don't want him or her to have to chase down 6 different people every time they want to talk to the team. The team leader assures that meeting agendas are established, schedules and conducts team meetings, keeps or sees that are kept, records, minutes, charts, data, a project book, if you will, learns and applies the statistical method, shares his or her experience and knowledge, shares responsibility for the team's progress, and works to build and maintain full participation, that this team is firing on all syllables. That's the team leader. What about the team member? What about when I'm called in and said, okay, you've been assigned as a member of this team? What are my responsibilities? I've got to share my experience and knowledge. I've got to actively participate in all team activities. This includes gathering, prioritizing, analyzing data. This includes gathering, prioritizing, and analyzing data between team meetings. Not all teamwork is done during team meetings. These are very efficient animals. The individual team members are doing stuff between the meetings and they're back in, share, back out, get more, back in, share. I mean, as you know, these types of teams, the meeting should never be more than an hour. Come on, we all have jobs. We can't be disappearing in the black hole of the conference room for 4 hours at a time. So this is what makes them so efficient, is the team member accepts, I have this responsibility to do some project work between team meetings. They help prepare, report team's progress. They contribute to building and maintaining full participation. It's not the team leader's job alone to keep their eyes open and notice that Johnny hasn't said anything. Every team member keeps their eyes open. And they see Johnny hasn't said anything. Either he hasn't had a chance or he hasn't chosen to. And they demonstrate the so-called gatekeeping skill. They say, gee, Johnny, what do you think? They kind of draw him in. They help develop and follow through on action plans, and they share responsibility for the team's progress. Whether or not this team makes progress is not the responsibility of the team leader alone. It's the response, every individual team member shares that responsibility. And then what about the key role of the sponsor? Every team, FMEA project team, new product development team, and project team, process improvement project team. Every team should have a sponsor or perhaps a committee to go to. What is his or her role? Number one, roadblock removal, period. We give these teams a lot of responsibility. They have no accountability. They have no authority. They have no authority. The lab is delaying on running a test for us. We need some data. Now we're busy supporting production. Go away, go away, go away. Well, the team doesn't have the authority to go to the lab manager and say, hey, put our request at the top of your schedule. We have to be able to go to escalate the issue to our sponsor, and it is his or her job to remove that roadblock. This requires a general understanding of the statistical concepts and methods, some involvement. They need not attend all team meetings, but every once in a while, pop in and say how things going, support, reinforcement. And I've always stressed the role of the project sponsor. If a project team fails, it is the fault of the sponsor. I'm so tired of these follow-up visits over the decades that I've been doing this. Well, managers say, that damn team, that stupid team, they don't seem to have any earthly idea what it is willing to work on, that darn team. Well, wait a minute. Who's responsible to clearly communicate what it is we want to work on? Management? That darn team, they can't do a gauge R&R to save their lives, to check to challenge the measurement system during the measure phase of their project. Well, wait a minute. Who's responsible to assure that the team or individuals have the training to do that gauge R&R? Management. That darn team. That darn team. Johnny and Bobby have never gotten along. They're bogging down the whole team's progress. They've had issues ever since Johnny ran off with Bobby's wife. Okay. I never heard that last part. But I, over the years, have had numerous cases of people saying, those two guys have never gotten along and they're bogging down the whole process. Well, why the heck did you put them on the same project? Come on. Use a little common sense here. You know your people. If they don't get along, don't put them on the same team. Jeepers. It's enough to drive you crazy. This is why I'm semi-retired. It's just making my head explode. On the other hand, if a project team succeeds, the sponsor has the credit to pass on to the team. So those are the key players within the team process. Again, the team process, what is it these teams go through? 3 phases. We got to get started, got to work together, we got to reach agreement. And what are some good projects for these types of teams? Number 1, we want to focus them on chronic systems issues, not firefighting. We know how to fight a fire, slap together the Kappa team, attack that. It's a short-term thing. No, we want to reserve them for chronic systems issues that are significant. We want to make sure this project is worthy of their limited time. At the same time, however, we must ensure they're feasible. This is the most often violated criterion in American management. We lob stuff over the wall at people, solve world hunger, boil the ocean. We just bury people. Now, but we have to be careful in assuring, these projects should never be more than 3 months or so. Never, ever, 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 in terms of scope. That helps with feasibility. But in assuring that the project is feasible, we don't want to water it down so it's no longer significant. How can management manage that balance between significance and feasibility? Well, in the basic procedure for improving a system, any system, we may form and deploy a project team and ask them to go this far. Collect and analyze the data, identify potential system changes for improvement. That's it. That's what we're after. We want you to submit those. And we will form a second team, perhaps with membership from the original project team for consistency's sake. We'll form a second team to go through the balance of the implementation and control of the new solution, if you will. Or, what about DMAIC, Six Sigma DMAIC, define, sounds demonic, define, measure, analyze, improve, control. How does that that rubric lay over this process that I have been using for 10 years, even before Six Sigma, because I'm old? Well, first 2 steps, we'll call it D, define. Next 2, M, measure. Get into analyze. Once we have the potential system changes for improvement, I, improve. And C, control. So again, to manage the balance between significance and feasibility, we may turn a team loose only to go through the analyze phase. We'll pass on their recommendations to another team for the balance of the procedure. And of course, they also have to be measurable. We've got to have measured gains to post, to publicize, and to brag about to our customers, internal and external. So those are the kinds of projects we want to give these kinds of teams. Again, we're talking about the temporary cross-functional process improvement project team here, but I still want to stress the process is generic. It applies to all kinds of teams. Here's an example. Years ago, a client who was at a paper mill and said, okay, here's the purpose of the project, kind of a general umbrella statement. We want you to develop a process and procedures to prevent unloading of chemicals at the wrong mill. Now, we can look at this and say, well, that's a dumb project. Just don't unload at the right mill. But this was a chronic systems issue. Middle of the night, chemical trucks were pulling in, tanker trucks were pulling into the yard, offloading, driving away, only to discover the next morning, hey, that's the wrong mill. And to scoop it up with a back loader, handling damage and contamination every step of the way and move it to the right mill. In terms of the scope, we want you to meet regularly. We're not going to tell you how often to meet. It's your project. Use data collection and appropriate statistical methods. We are not dictating that DOE must be used in all projects here. Appropriate statistical methods to accomplish this purpose. The scope of your efforts, and here management's giving them some leads. Collect data and study the history of delivery errors, the cost of mistakes, safety issues. These are chemicals. Don't just be coming up with a procedure for efficiency or speed. Safety issues, causes of unloading errors, delivery schedules, and other topics the team may feel are appropriate. You know, if we as the leadership team knew everything we needed to know about this issue, we'd fix it. We don't. That's one of the reasons we're turning you loose. And then expected results. Here, we're not talking about numerical goals, hopes, and wishes. Reduce improper unloading by 50%. No, we're communicating to the team. This is what we want you to put in our hand. When you've put this in our hand, your project is complete. If you have not yet put this in our hands, the project's not complete. So how did they do this? First, they said, well, present to the steering committee your team's restatement of this project and your initial action plan by. And this client, and many other of my clients, they would make about a 10-day to 2-week period. You know, do the initial work, come up with your action plan, and bring it to us, because we want to be in position to say, yes, that's what we meant, go ye forth, or no, that's not what we meant, let us redirect. And that's a big difference from the experience of many project teams who work for weeks only to later find out, well, that's not what we wanted you to work on. And then what do we want you to put in our hands? A detailed written procedure for delivering and unloading chemicals. And we want from you, because you can be working on this for a few weeks, we want from you specific recommendations and a proposed action plan for how best to implement your new procedure. Implementing the procedure is outside the scope of your project. We intend to use our line organization structure to drive continuous improvement. We intend to pass this on to the materials manager, and he or she's going to take care of it. Purpose, scope, expected results. Purpose, scope, expected results. The vast majority of your team experience, however, there is no steering committee on high assigning a formal project. Most of your team activities, you're coming together on the fly to deal with this issue. You still want to spend time. What's our purpose? What's the scope? What's the expected results? You've got to come up with it. There's got to be self-management in the vast majority of your team experiences. So, and then also last piece of reviewing managing the process, don't leave the team out there on their own. Every 2 to 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on scope of project, the sponsor or the steering committee gets together with at least the team leader. How are you doing? What have you learned? How can we help you? What problems are you having? How can we help you? What do you plan to do next? How can we help you? And if in response to the question, what do you plan to do next? You see them going off on a detour that's off the path and scope of your assignment, you redirect them right then. You don't do the project for them. The sponsor isn't going to do your project for you, but he or she is responsible for your success and can't let you go off on some non-value adding tangent. So that's just some of the topics, some of the issues about managing all of this, even though, as I mentioned earlier, in the vast majority of your team experiences, there is no steering committee. You have to come up with this. So the first phase of the team process, here we are. We just got our assignment. We're in our first meeting. What are our goals in this first phase? Number one, clearly define and agree on the team's purpose. Secondly, develop some ground rules for working together before we try to work together, and an initial action plan. And thirdly, work to create an open, receptive team climate. And I know that sounds touchy-feely, but what is it I'm talking about here? As early in the project as possible, we want to get to the point that during a team meeting, every individual team member feels safe enough to say anything without fear of being laughed at, without fear of being put down, without fear of being talked about outside the meeting, without fear. Because we are going to need that open, receptive team climate when we move into phase two and start blasting out alternatives. Among the project team's first steps, number one, restate the project assignment. In your own words, here's our understanding of the purpose, scope, expected results. In the absence of a steering committee, here's what we agree are our purpose, scope, and expected results. And then agree, yeah, this is what we're working on. And then establish some ground rules for working together before you try to work together. For example, meetings. How often are we going to meet? Weekly? Okay. What's the best day for you? Here's what the individual team member has to speak of. Got to stay away from Wednesdays because we have a department meeting at that time. Can't do that. Certainly not 8 a.m. on Monday, not 5 p.m. on Friday. So when are we going to meet? How are we going to handle absenteeism? In the safety of the getting started phase, let's define how we're going to deal with it before we get into the emotion when that one team member is not showing up very often. Well, okay, if you're going to be absent, send a substitute from your department, one might say. But another team member might say, yeah, but then we're going to have to spend a lot of time bringing him or her up to speed. I don't know if that's a good idea. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. How are we going to handle this? How are we going to? Okay, here's how we're handling it. If you're not going to be able to go, attend a meeting, give the team leader as much upfront notice as possible and submit to him or her any issues or information you want presented in your absence. That's how we're going to handle absenteeism. And establish it in the safety of the getting started phase. Records, meetings. Okay, are we going to have minutes? Well, of course we're going to have minutes. Who's going to keep them? Oh, a team leader might in many cases. In other cases, well, no, let's have it rotating. Every meeting, a different person will have their turn in the barrel to keep the minutes. To whom will we report those minutes? To whom will we submit them? Well, certainly the sponsor, if there's one. Maybe our immediate supervisors and managers, keep them posted on what we're doing. And then conflict. How are we going to handle it if two people get into it during a meeting in the safety of the getting started phase? Let's agree on how we're going to handle that. For example, if an argument breaks out, well, our ground rule is no arguments during meetings. Well, then it's never going to get settled. Okay, how about this? We're going to have a timekeeper. If two people get into it, pow, start the clock. We can't spend forever on this. You guys have 5 minutes. 5 minutes, present your case. If at the end of that 5-minute period, there is an agreement, then you've got to go out between this meeting and next and get more information and data to support your points. We are not spending 30 minutes during this meeting on your argument. Maybe there's a 5-minute rule. But again, I really want to stress in the safety of the getting started phase before the argument, before the emotion, let's establish and agree. Let's have a ground rule. How are we going to handle this? Maybe disagreement on next steps. Okay, are we going to elevate that to the sponsor? And we all agree we'll live with his or her call. Or are we going to invite in an SME, a subject matter expert, to give us a little guidance in the next meeting? Again, get this all settled out in the safety of the getting started phase, and then let's develop our initial action plan. A lot of you have been through project planning and so on, but I always preferred to keep it simple. How do we develop a plan? Well, just brainstorm by the rules. What specific action steps should be in our plan? Blast them out. Next, review and edit. Are these specific? I was working with a leadership team years ago, and one of the team members was a real advocate of Dr. Deming and his teaching. And so during the brainstorming, they were coming up with an implementation plan to make this thing happen throughout the plan. And he said when it was his turn, we got to drive out fear. We got to drive out fear. And in accordance with the rules of brainstorming, I wrote down word for word, we got to drive out fear. But we got to the review and edit step, and with all due respect to Dr. Deming, we crossed it off. It's not specific. I mean, I can't pull out a count. Okay, here's my day timer. I'll have fear driven out by next Thursday. I mean, it's got to be specific. Also, are they action items? If no, can we add an action verb? If no, cross it off. Hopes and wishes don't belong in an action plan. Then sequence the action steps. Most often it's clear these things have to happen before these things can. And for each agreed upon action step, assign responsibilities and checkpoints. Just a checkpoint on progress. Because absent responsibilities and checkpoints, plans become dreams. Essential statistical methods for getting started. What are we deploying there to accomplish those goals? Well, number one, process map. Dr. Deming always said the first step to improving the system is finding out what's wrong with the current system. So, map the process as is with all of its warts and imperfections. Brainstorming. We use brainstorming to generate ideas for our action plan, to generate ideas for our ground rules. But really, in the getting started phase, our major emphasis on the use of brainstorming is the part where there's no interruptions, no comments, no questions. Skillfully deployed, brainstorming helps to create that open, receptive team climate where people feel safe enough to say anything. We're also going to use fishbone diagrams, cause and effect diagrams throughout the project, because no matter what creative divergent tangents our brainstorming might take us on, putting it in this form, everything flows into that clear, common, shared purpose. It keeps us on track throughout the course of the project. We'll take a look at Pareto diagrams, control charts, other charts, if and only if they're already in use on the process under study. We'll use that information for our action plan. But if those tools are not yet in use in the process under study, the only tools we're using, process maps, brainstorming, fishbone diagrams, because those are the only tools we need to achieve the goals of the getting started phase. The statistical methods are essential. You can't complete a project effectively, efficiently, economically without them, but they're not sufficient. They're not sufficient. We also have to bring to the table some personal skills. For example, skilled team members. Please note, not team leaders, team members, one of whom is the leader. They activate discussions. They don't wait for some team leader to pound the gavel and say, okay, it's time to get going. They contribute to full participation by listening. Oh, active, effective listening. If someone's actively and effectively listening, can you hear him or her? When I ask that question in our team process workshop, most people say, well, no, because they're listening. No, but think about it. Have you ever heard, gee, Mary, by that do you mean? That person is working so hard to understand Mary's point that he's testing himself. By that do you mean? You'll also hear occasional lubricants. I see. That's interesting. Tell me more. So listening, asking good questions, as you know, are open questions. They can't be answered with a simple yes or no. That would make them closed questions. They begin with words like what, how, why, tell me. They always invite an expanded response. They don't limit the person you're questioning. And drawing others into discussion. I mentioned that earlier, that gatekeeping skill. Gee, John, what do you think? Drawing him or her in. Don't leave them out. They remain non-defensive and open even when challenged. That's easy for me to put on a PowerPoint slide. You know, and I know it's not easy, but skilled team members do it. They remind others about the team's common purpose and goals early and often throughout the project to keep everybody on track. Now here you say, Tom and Steve are buddies. They work together, play golf together. And Steve starts to go off on some tangent off the agenda. And Tom says, come on, Steve, what the heck does that have to do with what we're talking about here? He can get away with that. They're buddies. But he could say the same thing to another team member in the same tone of voice and destroy him or her. So we not only have to be thinking about what we're trying to do, keeping things on track, but also how we deliver that message. People I don't know very well, I'm a little more diplomatic, but my wife claims I never am. But a buddy, yeah, we can have at it. We're buddies. Focus on ideas versus emotions. They summarize frequently. That also helps keep people on track. They pay attention to process. the tools we're using and how effectively we're using them, the ground rules we've established and how effectively we're following them. But skilled team members are very balanced people. They pay attention not only to these team process issues, but also the product. The decisions we're taking and the quality of those decisions, the progress we're making versus the action plan. So those are the statistical methods and personal skills teams use in the first phase of the process so that they end up with that clear understanding of our purpose, scope, expected results. They have ground rules, they have the initial action plan, and they're starting to see emerge that open, receptive team climate. Having accomplished those goals, phase two, working together, what's going on here? We leverage off that open receptive team climate to freely generate alternatives, just testing out alternative causes, solutions, changes, etc., factors to include in our designed experiment, if that's appropriate. And through data collection and other means, we assign values to those alternatives. Again, this is the high energy, low conflict phase of the process. Statistical methods for working together. Wow, there's a lot we can select from. And again, we don't force tools into all projects. If design of experiments or process FMEA is not appropriate for the scope of this project, we're not going to use it. Remember the team, that steering committee, that example I showed you from the paper mill, use appropriate statistical methods to accomplish the improvement. Again, the cause and effect diagram to keep us on track. No matter what creative tangents we might go off on with our brainstorming, everything flows in to that clear, common, shared purpose. The team's propensity for data emerges in the working together phase. And God, we trust all of us must bring data. It is as it relates to statistical method, it's in the working together phase that the team is just getting through this basic procedure for improving a system, any system. And you can see the variety and alternatives for various tools to use to advance through each step. Personal skills, well, we got to keep an open mind, certainly. Pursue new ideas. Oh, nothing bogs a team down more readily than the comment, that won't work. We tried that. There's not enough resources. Well, what would we do if we had more resources? Pursue those new ideas. Don't impose barriers. Treat ideas equally. Now, we pass no judgment during brainstorming. Subsequent data collection and analysis, higher alternatives will emerge. The Pareto principle is a universal principle. Look for the most interesting aspect of every idea. Again, what could we do if we had more resources? Let's not arbitrarily impose that belief that, oh, well, we don't have enough resources. Again, ask good questions. No need to repeat that. Good open questions, and listen with interest and respect. So those are the personal skills. And Dr. Deming, during, sitting at dinner with him or during his seminars, one powerful question he always used to ask, I mean, he just nailed people with it. How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? Well, how do you know? How do you know your customers are satisfied? Well, we do surveys. How do you know? How do you know? What about the one who didn't return the survey? How do you know? I mean, he just drive you crazy with this. And the only place to find the answer to this question, I suggest skilled team members ask this question early and often of themselves and their teammates throughout the working together phase. Because the only way you find answers to this question, you got to go back inside this procedure. You've got to revisit the data. Maybe you've got to run another test. That's where you find the answer to that powerful question. How do you know? So now we've completed the second phase. We have our alternatives. We got data assigned. We've assigned values to those alternatives. Phase three, reaching agreement. What's going on here? The team has one and only one goal, consensus. Very misused, abused, overused, misunderstood word in Western management. Consensus, consensus. Well, gee, if that's our goal, what is consensus? We need a definition of consensus. And one of my favorite authors is Mark Twain. And on the topic of public speaking, he left us this advice. In public speaking, if you want to say something smart, think of something stupid and say the opposite. Well, let's arrive at an operational definition of consensus. Let's follow Mark Twain's advice. Let's talk about what consensus is not. And then we'll say the opposite. Consensus is not a unanimous vote. A consensus may not represent every individual's first priorities. Consensus is not a majority vote. In every election, there's a loser. Oh no, management cannot allow their teams in this process to be characterized by losing. Consensus is not compromise, despite what Congress tells us. Because in order to achieve compromise, I must give something up. And management cannot allow their teams in this process to be characterized by people having to give up. Consensus is not everyone totally satisfied. Well, if that's what consensus is not, then let's say the opposite. I've always loved William Dyer's operational definition and expansion on consensus. It is a decision hammered out. Oh man, if conflict is going to occur on your projects, plan on it in this phase when you are hammering out this decision. Dyer went on to note, after discussion, after give and take, after examination of alternatives, analysis of data during the working together phase, consensus is reached when every individual team member can honestly take this position. This is a good, sound decision. One I'm willing to implement, support, follow through on. I will not second guess it. I will not Monday morning quarterback it. I will not, I told you so. It may not be what I personally believe is the best solution. But given the range of options we have analyzed in the working together phase, given the time factor, given the kinds of personalities involved in this team, this is a good working decision, and I will support it. And unless every individual team member is willing and ready and willing to take that position, get the heck out of the reaching agreement phase, go back to working together, revisit the data, run some more tests, go back to getting started. Operate by your ground rules. How do we agree to handle something like this? Statistical methods for reaching agreement. There are none. Now that may seem weird, coming from a guy who bases all his work on the teachings of Dr. W. Edwards Deming, who said the statistical method are essential. But reaching agreement is not an activity to which I'm applying some tool. Reaching agreement is a result. It emerges from the work we did in the getting started and working together phases. That being said, however, you cannot achieve consensus without statistical method. You're just not deploying them in the third phase of the process. Back in the first phase, process math, brainstorming, fishbone diagrams, Pareto diagrams, other charts, if they're already in use on the project. Working together, again, rocketing through that basic procedure for improving a system, a lot of alternatives being deployed. And because of the effective application of these tools in earlier phases, consensus agreement results. It emerges from the correct use of those methods. So though there are no statistical methods that can be applied in the third phase of the process, there are nonetheless personal skills. Make the right decisions. This is a task-oriented behavior based on our agreed upon purpose, scope, expected results. Be optimistic. You know, you wouldn't have signed on to this back in the getting started phase if you didn't think you could accomplish it. Contribute your ideas. Don't hold back. Be open-minded. Avoid quick decision-making methods. Let me give an example here. We establish in our ground rules that if there's disagreement during a meeting, after discussion, we'll do voting and ranking. 5 if you think it's a major issue, 3 if it's an issue, 1 if it's a minor issue. And that helps. That helps during the working together phase to keep you moving. If you have that ground rule, however, it's suspended during the reaching agreement phase. We're not doing voting in the reaching agreement phase. In every vote, there's a loser. We're not using that. However, and focus on facts. Manage your time. Remember, one factor that contributes to consensus decision, given the alternatives we considered, given the time factor, and once again, remain non-defensive and open even when challenged. Easy for me to say, not easy for you to do, as you know. And, you know, again, things are really bogged down here in the third phase. 4 team members say this is the way to go. 1 team member's holding out. Nope, nope, nope. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So, okay, go back to working together. Revisit the data. He or she may have seen something the rest of us missed. Go back to getting started. How did we agree to handle something like this? And in some cases, it may have been, we will escalate the issue to the sponsor and we all agree we'll live with her call. In the vast majority of cases, conflict that occurs in the third, disagreement that occurs in the third phase of the process will be overcome by stepping back to an earlier phase. But so many people get so hung up on this. Oh, what am I going to handle it? I mean, what if that person says, no, data, this doesn't have anything to do with data. No, that ground rule doesn't apply here. We didn't anticipate this. You got to deal with it. This often falls to the team leader, but the individual team member, who a friend of this person may say, well, I got to deal with this. So they go back to meet with this person and you just describe your observations. Bob, when you kept pushing your favorite alternative all through the last 3 meetings, I feel. And just describe how you feel. I feel angry. I feel frustrated. Because explain your feelings. Now, we might come from a task-oriented perspective because we haven't completed a single agenda item in our last 3 meetings, or maybe more of a maintenance-oriented perspective because I see the other team members withdrawing and shutting down. And then inhale. Give him or her a chance to react, but then be prepared to describe a desired behavior. You know, our next meeting, we're scheduled to open with some brainstorming. Bob, I'd like you to grab the marker and work the flip chart during the brainstorming. And when it's your turn, the rules of brainstorming, you can put that favorite alternative back up on the flip chart. Because explain why you want him to do that. It'll show that you're rejoining us. It'll become more of a group activity. We'll start to make some progress with the brainstorming and then discuss. I just spent way too much time on this, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, because the vast majority of cases, you're going to overcome these disagreements by going back to working together or back to reaching agreement. Those rare cases, this is a technique that works. And we have to think not only what we want to say to him or her, really preparing a script, if you will, but also when to deliver this message. Here again, let's follow Mark Twain. Let's think about bad times to have this discussion with Bob. Immediately after the meeting when the emotions are high, bad time. 8 a.m. Monday morning, bad time. 5 p.m. Friday afternoon, bad time. So just think about bad time in front of other people, bad time. And then pick a good time and deal with it. So another thing we have to bear in mind is that this process is iterative. I'm giving you a false introduction to it with this webinar. It's not a case of get started, check, reach agreement, check, or work together, check, reach agreement, check. It's not linear like that. It's iterative. You'll go through a few iterations of the process during a project. For example, that unloading of chemicals at the wrong mill. Well, that team had to get started, work together, reach agreement on what are the major causes of the unloading errors to begin with. Then they had to get started, work together, reach agreement on that new procedure for eliminating the causes, thereby preventing the unloading of chemicals at the wrong mill. They had to go through 2 complete iterations of the process. So don't let people lose heart when they have not that sense of get started, check, work together, check, reach agreement, check. It's going to be iterative. And a beautiful model of the iterative nature of this process is the Deming cycle, plan, do, study, act. Ishikawa refined the Deming cycle when he noted planning is more than determining targets and goals. We also have to determine methods to reach those goals. Doing is more than implementing the plan. We're also going to have to engage in education, explanation, orientation to people who may be involved and are affected by the plan. We then study the effects of the implementation. We compare the results to the plan and take appropriate action. If the results deviated from the plan, we have to take corrective action. If results are in line with the plan, we then take action to hold those gains. And in all cases, kick back into the plan portion of the cycle. Plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act, plan, do, study, act. A beautiful illustration of the iterative nature of this model. So that's the team process, what we prepared. Thank you for investing time you didn't have. This is the time for questions, comments, curses. Chris, I hope you were keeping track of what people were noting in the Q&A because I didn't see it. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. As always, that was a great presentation. I would like to open the floor to questions. If anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Jim, are you okay if we PDF these materials and send it out to everyone who joined today?
Yeah, I've got that PDF file. I'll send it to you.
Okay, great. So there was a question on the materials and the presentation being available.
Yeah.
This will also be recorded, and I will provide the link once it's recorded, processed, and available on our YouTube page.
You know, one thing I didn't add, Chris, was that we do have a 2-day team process workshop where we're going through all of this stuff and more. But also, that process is very experiential because we break people up into teams. They actually get started, work together, reach agreement on a real work issue as a part of that 2-day workshop. So I just wanted to mention that as well. If people are thinking, gee, I think we need more than this, I'd like to learn more than this. So there's that option too.
Great. Great. Thank you, Jim. Well, yeah, let's just give everyone a minute or so. If you have any questions, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a Q&A feature. Please let us know if you have any questions for Jim. Here's one. How to handle difficult people, no constructive comment, suggestion, or ideas.
They do not provide constructive.
Comments, suggestions, or ideas.
There again, it often falls to the team leader, but again, an individual team member who is an associate of this person might go through that little outline, just describe your feelings, what you'd like them to do, and so on. Backing up to that. Um, this thing, I've had 4 daughters. This thing works with teenage daughters. I mean, if it works with teenage daughters, because my problem was I was a guy and I kept saying, well, we got to solve this problem. My wife was always across the room going, shut up, shut up, shut up. No, I want to talk to them. They don't want to talk to you right now. When can I talk to them? When they're 21. So that was my problem. But this thing, just prepare. And you do have to put preparation into it I don't want to say confront that person outside the meeting, but to approach that person and be prepared to describe what you have observed, how it makes you feel, explain why, inhale. And the other thing is, by the way, this need not all be completed in one sit down. You may get as far as explaining your feelings or describing a desired behavior and explain, and then say, hey, why don't we get together at Dunkin' Donuts tomorrow on the way to work? We'll wrap this up. But in the case of the person who is not participative, there again, go back to the ground rules. And there will be occasions when you have to go to your team leader, has to go to the sponsor and say, this person is misplaced on this team. It's not working. I mean, and again, we don't do violence to them. We don't put them down or try to destroy them. It's just, sometimes we make a mistake in assigning people to projects. Maybe his or her skills are more applicable elsewhere. But there again, without a sponsor, you're going to be kind of swinging in the wind.
Great. Another question, Jim. Do you subscribe to the idea that identifying roadblocks and removing them is part of the plan on the Deming cycle?
Yeah, certainly when we get to study and we find out, holy mackerel, we did not, I wouldn't say plan. I wouldn't say plan. We can't always plan for work for roadblocks. It usually happens in the study phase after we've implemented the plan, however limited, even if it's just that gauge R&R study, for example. That's where we find out, man, we didn't accomplish what we set out to do here. What was the roadblock? That's usually where you find them. And then in terms of taking appropriate action, sometimes the team might have the authority to do something about a particular roadblock, but more often than not, they really need that person with position power that they can go to, who is their sponsor, to help in that roadblock removal. But I would say in the Deming cycle, I most often encounter the roadblocks or discover them, recognize them in the study phase when I find out, hey, we didn't accomplish what we set out to accomplish it. What happened?
Great. In this team process, how quality and reliability awareness plays to aim for 0 defects?
Yeah. There's no such thing as zero defects. Other than that, our effort is to improve processes continuously. And how is the question though? Reliability? Are you talking about reliability as a work group or
Yeah,
reliability of data?
yeah. Maybe we can give some time if that question wants to be clarified. But there's a next one that what are your top tips for building trust and safety within a team?
I don't mean to minimize this, but effective deployment of brainstorming early in the project. Also, discussion with the group when coming up with ground rules. Maybe team leader, maybe all the group has gone through the training. I don't know, but just we want to make sure people feel safe enough here to say anything. Just come out and state that without fear of being laughed at, without fear of being put down, without fear of being talked about. A ground rule. What is said in this meeting from a personal perspective remains in this meeting. We don't run out and tattle on people. Of course, data collection and other things we do in the meeting are going to be shared with people outside, but that's not specifically identified to an individual team member.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Um, the follow-up from the question before was reliability and product development process.
Okay, yeah. Oh, there's the case. Back to the getting started phase, map that product development process. And Paul Hine, my lean guru, always said, if you do an initial overview process map and have more than 15 steps, and by that he meant things that advance the work, not diamonds for decisions, beware. You've either fallen prey to the detail monster or your scope is too broad. So especially in product development, it's more like we're kind of breaking it down into stage gate. That there's some preliminary things that are done. There's an initial design. There's then maybe there's going to be another team that we're handing off as they're getting into prototype and so on. But really manage the scope of that new product development process with the initial process map and break it up into appropriate zones, if you will, keeping in mind scope. I mean, there's back to the feasibility issue, the most often violated criterion in formation and deployment of teams. Sometimes they're just too broad. And a part of the project is we're discovering where there's lack of reliability in the new product development process. I mean, all of these projects, every one that we head off on, we learn something.
Great. Well, thanks, Jim. I think that was thanks everyone for the questions. That was a good Q&A. I think if it's okay with you, we can end off here a couple minutes early. And there was a lot of other comments, Jim, of how great the presentation was and how much they enjoyed it and appreciated it.
Okay. Rather than signing off early, because I'm a Navy veteran, as a part of our workshop, we had people come back from a break and say, hey, think about some teams on which you've served that were not successful. I asked people who have remained here, think about those unsuccessful project teams, and then think about the problems those unsuccessful teams experience. What brought them to their knees? And then we talk about, people have said, well, team members don't show up for meetings, getting off track, changing priorities, moving targets, and so on. Wrong people on the team. It's kind of related to that Q&A somebody brought up. And then we go through, well, there are two types of problems teams experience. One is internal problems. They stem from individual team members' behaviors. They come from within the team. A second is external team problems. They stem from an unsupportive environment. They come screaming in from outside the team and drive the team to their knees. So after going through that, we go back to the list they came up with and said, okay, how many of the problems that you have experienced? Remember, it's not something I'm presenting in a text. This is based on their experience. How many are internal and how many are external? In all cases, without exception, there are 2 to 3 times more internal problems than external. For example, team members don't show up for meetings. Well, what's the fix? Ground rules, back in the getting started phase, getting off track. What's the fix? Purpose, scope, expected results. Arguments during meetings, ground rules. How do we agree to handle this? Conflict, ground rules, unclear objectives, purpose, scope, expected results. Team members don't do their part, ground rules, lack of participation. Now, wait a minute. You need to tell me that clearly defined upfront purpose, scope, expected results, and ground rules are going to prevent all of these problems from our future teams? No. Clearly defined purpose, scope, expected results, and ground rules will merely prevent the vast majority of these problems, because I will bet dimes to donuts none of those unsuccessful project teams that came to mind when I asked that question had clearly defined upfront purpose, scope, expected results, and ground rules. What about changing priorities, moving targets, lack of resources, wrong people on team? Again, you're highly dependent on your sponsor. But Dr. Deming always said, dealing with these, first step, education for all in positions of leadership, leadership theory, concepts, methods, profound knowledge. That's the first step to assure that healthy work environment. So I don't know what Q&A led me onto this, but I just wanted to think about the problems you've really experienced. The vast majority always come out internal, and you can manage those. So,
Great. A couple other comments, Jim. Fantastic. Jim is always wonderful. Great presentation.
all right, thank you. And you're going to get this in with your PDF files too, folks. Just, run a copy, post it on the wall, or never come back for another webinar. So, thank you. God bless you. Happy Easter, by the way. And hey, maybe we'll see some of you. Maybe I'll see some of you in a future QSG workshop.